Hi everybody, Colin Tansley and Peter Taylor with Risk Watchdogs Live. It's been a couple of weeks since we've been on, a whole load of reasons for that, which we won't bore you with, but we've had a little bit of a rest and come back re-energised. So just to sort of touch base about what we do on these little broadcasts. So all we want to achieve using our experience and knowledge is just raising your knowledge and awareness really about various aspects of fraud and cyber. And really, we're quite big on crime prevention. So prevention is better than cure. And today, Peter's going to share his knowledge of the Fraud Act and fraud, and we're going to sort of kick that about. I'm just going to have a sort of informal discussion. Feel free to chip in if you're listening. I'll put the comments. I'll be monitoring the comments as we go through. So, all right, Peter, over to you, my friend.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things I want to discuss is we've got fraud with a capital F, as in the Fraud Act.
Yeah.
But we've also got fraud with a small f, as in, the general term. And the general term for most people, if you ask them what fraud is anything that tells a lie about itself, or where there's a deception involved. And that's, that is fair enough. But when you've got a complaint of fraud, or when somebody comes to me and says I've been defrauded, what you can do is what a poor investigator will do is let's prove that this person has committed fraud. Well, I've spent 30 years of stepping back first, and a better fraud investigator will try and find out who has committed the fraud, and whether or not it is the person that you suspect or whether it's somebody else. But an even better investigator, it really starts with, well, first of all, have we actually got a fraud in criminal terms, and are we able to prove that? If we're going to the criminal court, we have to be able to prove that beyond reasonable doubt. And remember, with the criminal courts, we have to prove somebody's guilt. They don't have to prove their innocence. If there's the absence of proof of guilt, as in beyond reasonable doubt, then they're not going to be convicted. If it goes to a civil court, or if it's a matter like a contract dispute that could end up before the civil court, then the evidence, the burden of proof drops slightly to, well, not slightly, it drops to the balance of probabilities. So would a reasonable person think that this person has committed fraud? But one of the things that I do see is that quite a lot of people will think that somebody's committed fraud, or will allege that somebody's committed fraud, but they don't actually know enough to actually firm up that allegation. So when you start asking questions, you find out that certain things are missing, or you haven't got any chance of proving that, or they haven't actually, that element of the offence hasn't been committed. So what I thought would be useful is just to take Section 2 of the Fraud Act in relation to false representations. And what lawyers will do, and what investigators will do, and what I would do in my police days and the police still do, is actually look at the elements of the offence. And the elements of the offence as defined by the law are that obviously to be convicted of under the Fraud Act with a false representation, there's got to be some kind of false representation. So there's got to be some kind of lie that has been told or substantiated. Then we move on to the second element of the offence. So, I mean, Colin, dishonesty. What sort of things do you look for on dishonesty?
Well, when I remember going back to sort of police training school, and there was a lot of discussion about what dishonesty was, and it was that which is not honest was one of the most simple explanations. But I always sort of refer to your average man or woman in the street. What do they perceive to be honest? And it's that acid test, isn't it? But dishonesty isn't all, and sometimes it's the actions of that particular person. The typical one with shoplifting, where someone's acting furtively and suspiciously, looking around, all that sort of stuff, wasn't it? And but often it's behaviour. comments, things done, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so if somebody's told you something is pink, you've said, is it pink? And they've said, yes, it is pink, and it turns out to be blue.
Yeah.
And they knew that it was blue all along. Then you've got both the action that they've taken that is dishonest.
Yeah.
If but then there might be an intent to deceive you. There might be a reason why they want you to have a pink one instead of a blue one. They might have blue ones available but send you a pink one. Because that kind of action would be dishonest. But then below that, and where it starts to get difficult for investigators, these things are hard to prove. Somebody's, I put a post up that people challenged me on it. It's actually been a really interesting post on LinkedIn where I quoted some of we talked about offences being offender focus, and people say, well, you can't find that and you can't prove that. Well, if you can't prove that, you're not going to be able to convict somebody of it, and you're probably not going to be able to win in court. But one of the reasons why you sometimes can't find dishonesty is because it's something a lower level. So it may be that somebody didn't check. Now, again, that could be willfully negligent. So it comes back to touching on dishonesty or being potentially dishonest.
Yeah.
Or it could just be an error.
Yeah.
They might have looked in the wrong box. They might have thought they were telling you the truth. They themselves might be a victim of fraud. Yeah. So, as I say, dishonesty is the first thing we look for. And again, we're not looking to prove straight away. We're looking to set our investigation objectives. So we're not saying that if one of these elements are missing, we're not looking for all the evidence straight away, but we know where to look and we know what it is we were looking for.
It comes down to what we refer to as reasonable suspicion to sort of move it, isn't it?
Yeah. And then we've got knowing that the representation was or might be untrue or misleading. So again, keeping it really basic and simple. You wanted blue and you've now got pink. And they're telling you it's pink. It becomes worse if perhaps the victim was blind or colourblind, and therefore, that kind of thing. It might be stuff that you're looking for. And then the one that everybody seems to get upset about and says it's unfair. The law isn't fair. Justice is blind. The law is the law. Policemen sometimes get hung up on it because they're not sure themselves. And other investigators. Remember, for a police officer, like a general practitioner, and then fraud comes along, and it might be like brain surgery. So they might start something, but they probably might need to pass it on to a specialist from the economic crime units or whatever. But it has to be with the intent to make a gain for himself or another. Again, I apologise. All law seems to be written in male, but the law actually says for himself or another, but it obviously includes people of any gender. Or to cause loss to another or expose another to risk of loss, and that has to be financial or property. Now, people get really upset about this. If perhaps a fraud is done which can't be shown to have affected their revenue, their profits, their losses, to losing property, that it might be something else. It might be some kind of physical loss, or whatever. What you've got to remember is that the Fraud Act is there for a particular purpose. Now, just because you've been deceived and the gain or loss can't be shown, it might come under some other legislation, or there might be another remedy. Often those remedies are actually better worded and better set up for you to actually get satisfaction. So sometimes when somebody says, I don't think this is the Fraud Act, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of things. For you. And then last but not least is that the offence is entirely offender focused. So what that means is when you receive an email with a malicious link on it because somebody's trying to take over your account, trying to deceive you into handing over your bank details, if you look at it and you think that's a dodgy email, I'm just going to delete it, That you weren't fooled. That doesn't matter. The offence is committed by the offender, so it's the action that they take, or what their intent is, and that clarifies things quite a lot. And we're all learning all the time. I put a post up on LinkedIn about the fraud offences being offender focused, and Professor Mark responded to it. He's been involved in the development of fraud and combating fraud for a long time, and he said that part of the intent for that was the anticipation that we would be providing information to machines rather than people. And for once the crystal ball was very clear there, and it is very true that quite often people just aren't involved, and it would be really difficult under the old acts, the theft acts of 68 and 78, which didn't have the offence being entirely offender focused. So quite a bit of wisdom there, really. The offence is entirely offender focused.
It had to show that they were deceived, wasn't it? And that was under the Theft Act of old.
Yeah, and it made life a lot more difficult. And so again, I do know that there are times when people don't take on fraud cases, they've not understood or whatever, and it's wrong and it's unfair. But sometimes it might not be that it's unfair because somebody isn't interested. It might be unfair because the circumstances don't fit the offence of fraud.
Yeah, and one thing I get a little bit frustrated with as a private investigator, you've probably come across this yourself, is that you do get private individuals approaching it. They've clearly been defrauded.
Yeah.
Prepare a package for them. They can take it to the authorities, the police, and they will turn around and say civil debt without even conducting a level of investigation to filter it. And that is frustrating. But because they all require a level of investigation or some sort of, but it seems to be, I've seen it countless times of late where you just get, it's like a revolving door, take it in, no, we're not dealing with it. Without even looking at it, it's a civil debt. There has to be a level of investigation with it, isn't there? To sort of make that decision.
Yeah, I think the other thing though that is important is that when you are, particularly if you're paying somebody to investigate on your behalf, that they are aiming for the unreasonable doubt, and aiming to prove a crime. Because if that's the case and that's the standard of evidence that they've helped or put together on your behalf, then balance of probabilities becomes easier. And proving a civil debt becomes easier. So it's aiming for that high standard, not aiming for the lowest possible standard. That might get you through. So that's covered it for me, Colin. Is there anything you wanted to add?
No, that's great, mate. That's a really good explanation. It's I like the machine piece that you mentioned as well. It makes perfect sense. I'm moving forward. You've touched on gain.
Covered. We've actually covered gain and loss. Yeah.
Okay. No, that was a really good discussion, and I think you could go on for about a couple of hours of this, couldn't you? But just for those people out there, if you're listening, Peter is an expert in his field. He's taught me a lot about fraud, actually. And I've sort of 40 years in. You never stop learning with this stuff. We used the Fraud Act when I was at FACT it was almost like a go and quit for fraud, where people were taking sort of cameras into theatres, and then private prosecutions to a standard the same as beyond reasonable doubt. So we can help you with CPD certified training and e-learning. We're looking to develop a risk Watchdogs academy so we can sort of mentor budding investigators, because we're getting old and crusty now in Castle Grey skills, as you called it. But we continue to do investigations, and we're always happy to help out. And we've got both cyber and fraud risk assessments within IRIS. So thank you for listening today, and thank you very much, Peter. That was really insightful. And I'll leave you with your favourite saying.
Let's be careful out there.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.